This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of FI Investment Group and your host of Washington Current Review, where we interview leading voices from business and politics that impact you, the viewer. Today, our guest is Narayan Lakshman. Narayan works for a widely circulated, well-known Indian newspaper called The Hindu. He's well recognized within the community of journalists. So, welcome to our show, and thank you for coming, Narayan. We appreciate that very well.
Thank you, Frank.
My first question to you will be, what's your role as a U.S. correspondent to an Indian newspaper, which is Hindu?
So I write for The Hindu, as you said, which is one of India's largest English language daily newspapers, and our circulation is well over 1 million there.
And it's in English?
It's in English. It's a printed daily newspaper, and we circulate all over the country. I am this newspaper's sole representative in the U.S., which makes my job very interesting because there's so much to cover. And I've been in this role for a little over 5 years. Mostly based out of Washington, but then depending on the kind of stories that break, I travel across the country to meet Indian Americans and many others for my coverage.
So what's your biggest challenge being a U.S. correspondent for the Indian newspaper?
I would say the biggest challenge is probably deciding on the kind of coverage that is of most interest to my readers. So obviously you can cover everything from politics in Washington to politics in the US states, to society, to economics, the Wall Street stuff, things happening in New York. But it's the job of a person like me out in the field to work with my editors and decide what is most interesting to our 1 million plus readers in India and many readers across the world. That is the first big challenge. A second challenge that exists is that being a correspondent for a foreign newspaper, within the Beltway, there's sort of newspaper clubs, and some media organizations have better access to the media.
Are you part of that club?
Well, I'm a part of some clubs. I'm not a part of all the clubs, but what I mean is, for example, if you're the New York Times or the Washington Post or CNN, you will have a lot of access to the White House and special access in the State Department, which not all papers have. But even then, there are that you can be creative, and there are ways to get news from other sources outside the Beltway and outside the main government organizations, which can give your story a lot of color, and that's what I try to do most of the time.
Okay, so the United States is a free and inclusive country, an open society, very much similar to India, because both countries have a shared interest and shared values. We are the oldest democracy, and India is the largest democracy in the world, right? Do you find any difference in terms of covering as a journalist in the United States as well as and also in India when you're a journalist?
Definitely I do. I've worked in India as well in our headquarters in Chennai, and I've done a lot of agrarian reporting. I covered the countryside there too. And I think the big difference vis-a-vis India and the US in terms of my work has been that in the US everything is a little more formalized and institutionalized. You do go through official channels a lot more. But in India, there's the culture of jugaad, which is...
What's a jugaad?
Jugaad is basically kind of an informal approach. You make do, you learn on the fly.
Okay.
So that approach it applies to the media as well, and their informal channels work a lot more. Whereas here, for the State Department, you have certain fixed routes to access people. You have freedom of information laws. Everything is a set way. So that's a big difference.
So you use the word, if I remember correctly, institutionalized, because the fact that we have been in this kind of business as for several hundred years.
Yeah, very
right?
much so.
So obviously we haven't mastered it, but we obviously have a lot of process in place. So if the president have it's a rare in a sense, the president have the White House announcement, White House press conference, do they call you upon it saying, or do they just call the newspaper which is caters to the American audience?
I think it's a bit of both. So when there's, for example, a very high-level story that the administration wants to plant, say regarding the assassination of Osama bin Laden or something like that, they might go to the New York Times. But last year, when Prime Minister Modi made a visit, it was such a big deal for Indians, for the Indian American community in Madison Square Garden and things like that. So the Indian media in the U.S. were the first port of call for many such briefings and statements and things like that. So So it's an ebb and flow of both types of sources.
So, Narayan, I went with President Obama to India as a part of the delegations in January. I met the prime ministers and we had a dinner at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, which was a pretty good treat.
Yeah, sure.
And met the President of India when I was there, and several ministers and so on, as a part of the India CEO Summit, which is what, in addition to me, there are about 9 or 11 more people who went as a part of the delegation. On that topic of discussions, obviously, both countries have a shared interest and shared values, and we want to partner with India so that we can broaden our relationship and engagement with India. We want India to become a global power. What's your thought and what's your take right now in U.S.-India relationship? What are the challenges that we face and India is facing it, especially with the Prime Minister Modi's vision of a smart city, the digital city, Make in India, and the list goes on and on. And I heard all those things when I was in India. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's an excellent question. And I think, as you've obviously seen firsthand, both during Prime Minister Modi's visit and when President Obama was there, there's a great amount of momentum in the relationship, which the two leaders have also built on their own chemistry, personal chemistry. And I think, however, while there's a lot of momentum that to carry it forward, there are certain important factors on both sides that have to be addressed. So Prime Minister Modi, for the last 1 year, his anniversary is just coming up this week.
He has been about a year.
Yeah,
right?
so he's been very busy doing a lot of things in terms of the economic reforms, but work remains to be done. So for example, infrastructure in India is still very poor, and
they need to improve infrastructure. It's just not the road and the waterways and the airport, but the human capital as well.
Exactly that, which is governance issues.
So for example, absolutely right.
Ease of doing business. Things like this matter a lot to big American companies as well, which are trying to...
All the foreign companies,
exactly.
They want to protect their capital. And to give an example to illustrate my point, Marriott CEO was with me as a part of the delegation. He says, it's not the central government that puts a lot of restriction. It's the state, which is in case Maharashtra government that he wanted to build in a hotel, Marriott in Bombay. He says takes 16 layers of the management approval. Why is that?
I mean, that is my point I was coming to, which is exactly that because India, like America, is so complex, it has many state players, it has different parties, and everyone wants a share of the pie, the reform process is very slow. And that actually is, to me, one of the big challenges in terms of the US and India to keep their relationship going fast and moving forward. They have to give each other space for, sometimes change will be piecemeal, it'll be incremental, it won't be overnight like the Big Bang. I think the civil nuclear deal which happened raised everybody's expectations through the roof because it was a big bang. And since then, we in the media are guilty of making this question even like more enhanced. We say, where's the next Big Bang? But that should not lead to a situation of too much pressure, because that's when, both parties might, there's a risk they'll get disappointed with each other. But I think, again, this is where President Obama and Prime Minister Modi's chemistry comes into the picture. And it's a real sort of mitigating factor when there's such pressure. It's going to make things easier.
The Prime Ministers and government-to-government engagement is important, but the community, Indian diaspora community, people-to-people engagement, business-to-business engagement, philanthropist-to-philanthropist engagement, that will play a very crucial role in advancing the trade and commerce investment with India. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. Again, there's no better example than the civil nuclear deal, where I know for a fact
that the Indian diaspora played a very important role.
Exactly, in shepherding this through Congress, along with President Bush and his administration. And I think today, this is my biggest experience in the last 5.5 years I've been reporting here, which is the amazing things that this community is doing, both in terms of their own social and individual accomplishments, but like you said, also to help the relationship, the bilateral relationship move forward. And again, there I think they need to continue to stay engaged, despite.
So that's the some advice for the diaspora community, the Indian community, is they stay engaged and involved and informed.
I would say that. I would say don't get impatient with India. India is, as we just discussed, a nation of many kind of pushes and pulls, and sometimes reform will slow down. But Indian American community has to stay engaged in order to advance very important sectors such as education, where, for example, they were talking about the vocational colleges. India needs to create a million jobs.
Community colleges. And they need to create the 21st century workforce if they want to make it India.
Yeah.
What things that I have, and I made that point very clear to the Prime Minister, that make it India means not make by India, made for India, and make it India.
Right.
If they want to be a global leader, and they should expand their horizons. But obviously, that there are challenges that they're working with the state and the provincial government, where they have their own agendas.
Correct.
And they're not part of the Prime Minister Modi's BJP government, as I understand.
Exactly. And let's not forget a very important factor, which is although Prime Minister Modi's victory was a landslide, he only won the Lok Sabha.
He did not win the
Rajya Sabha,
upper part
which is now proving to be a difficulty for him because they're blocking a lot of the policies that he's put forward, including the land acquisition bill.
Which is very important.
Yep, and the goods and services tax, which would create a uniform tax territory across the country in some senses. So these are things where, it's important to put out the message to the American and Indian American communities and say, please be patient and, stay engaged with us.
So the word patient is important for all of us to understand it, and I agree with that. But the patient doesn't run out.
Right.
Obviously, just to do the legal system in India is very ancient and old. So when I met Mr. Jaitley, who's a finance minister, he said they're going to have own ombudsman in the court to hear these kind of situations where where the foreign company have a problem. That I think that will really help because the backlog in judiciary system in India is long.
Correct.
It takes forever to get any court hearing. Correct.
Absolutely.
And my also question is, what are the obviously you look at the brighter horizon about the relationship, and so do I, and so do we. Do you think if I have to talk to you 10 years from now, which I hope we do you think our trade with India will be close to $1 trillion?
I think it's very possible. What you said is undeniable, which is there are some very severe problems like the retrospective taxation, which spooked a lot of investors, American
and also the double taxing is another problem.
Double taxing too. But I think, again, if we're talking about 10 years now, what we're looking at is the strategic picture. So until now, we've been looking at the sectoral picture, at industry, and that will move forward because of P2P, person-to-person, B2B, business-to-business connections. But if we're looking at the strategic picture, we're talking about things like the rise of India within Asia. And again, this whole thing about the oldest and the largest democracies coming together, there's a lot vested in spreading democratic values across Asia. And for that, the US and India have to think of their partnership in very broad terms. It could be down to things like maritime security. It could be down to things like trade routes and oil pipelines, which connect the whole continent. So all that matters, and of course you do have the unspoken China factor, but it's not seen as a zero-sum game. What America and India do is for the good of the world. At least that's the message.
So what I hear that the United States can aid India in achieving global economic power.
It's possible.
But India has to do its own share.
Exactly. That is the catch in the whole thing.
For example. To give an example to illustrate my point, I want to invest some money in the memory of my mother to establish a school in India, and it has been 7 years and still I do not have approval for FCRA.
Okay.
So my question is, the people who are bureaucrats, they're not doing their job properly, and how the government is making sure that they do their job.
That is absolutely right. I mean, it's a very illustrative example, I guess, which hits home for you.
Yeah,
it's a personal example.
Personally, it's a personal example.
And there is no doubt that both bureaucratic sort of inertia as well as corruption is still there, though Prime Minister Modi has done a lot. Yeah.
I think it at least recognize there's a corruption and recognize that the bureaucrat is not moving their paperwork and they're not working very hard. And he has been a champion of that.
Exactly.
But things a little bit takes a long time.
It does.
It's
And it
like
helps,
moving a mountain.
Yeah, and it helps to remember how bad things were 1 year ago, which was in a state of paralysis and those terrible scams which were completely engulfing the government. And we've moved some way from that. I still think there's a lot of work, and maybe Prime Minister Modi in his second year will do a little less foreign travel. He will try and fix the problems at home. But I think, it's been a good start, and hopefully it'll keep going.
I think the President Obama talked about it on his last day, is being inclusive and open society and giving a freedom of faith and religious equality, which has been a part of India's social and economic political fabric for centuries. Yeah. And they have been the beacon of hope for everyone in the world.
Correct.
So why is Prime Minister he had made the speech about freedom of faith, has been reluctant to tell his own people to basically say, this is not who we are. I'm the Prime Minister for all the people in this country.
Correct. That's an excellent question, and one that's frankly very close to my heart.
To you.
It's very close to my heart, and even my newspaper, we write a lot about this issue and we follow it. Because secularism, as you correctly said, it's not only in the Constitution of India, but it's just in our ethos and our culture.
It's a part of our DNA.
Yeah,
it has been there.
And it explains why we are successful as a community, even abroad and everywhere.
And look at the examples of Pakistan. Obviously, they have not done very well in terms of secularism. So Islamists have taken over in some parts, and that's I wouldn't say that I look forward to India that caters to the exceptionalism and also destroys and defeats the extremism.
Exactly. I think we are on the right path, but we have a little way to go. I was very enthused by the first year of Mr. Modi's governance, because his election campaign did not have these religious idioms. And since then, he has also focused a lot on economic development. But he does have these ties to the Sangh Parivar and the RSS.
Which is the Hindu nationalist.
The Hindu nationalist
And they put him, they propel him where he is today. So he needs to cater to them.
Yes, that is a risk. That's a risk that he faces.
He needs to kind of think it through a little bit.
Exactly. And at the same time, to be very honest.
Do you think he gets it?
I think he's dealing with it. He's grappling with it. I don't know if he's got it yet. One thing I will say is...
But you have a responsibility to write about it, to make sure that people know.
We do. And for example, we bring a lot of attention to things like the attacks on the churches that we've seen. There's this whole Ghar Vapsi, which is the reconversion of people who converted to other religions back to Hinduism.
A society cannot be productive
not worth it,
when you're putting so much pressure on them.
I agree.
That is not the face of India. They're very used to it.
Absolutely.
And my story can only happen in America because America gave me the opportunity to succeed, and also it's inclusive and open society.
Exactly.
And when you have inclusive open society, everyone prospers.
Exactly.
And become part of that nation. Also, not only prosper, also they're more productive.
Absolutely.
When they confront hostility and open prejudice, it's just not based on religion. It's based on gender. You have to provide gender equality and the economic opportunity and so on and so forth. Tell me, what's your plan for the future? We have a limited time here. Narayan, I mean, you've been very articulate in your vision. Yes. The way you express yourself.
Well, absolutely. That comes just from my absolutely enriching experience in the U.S. I have seen all sides of it, everything from immigration issues to the mundane politics of Washington and this shutdown and all these dramatic
things. Very sad. This is not who we are as an American.
I know. It took some explaining to make my readers understand what is this? Why is the government shutting down? But anyway, so my plans, I've really enjoyed this stint, and I feel I've got a sense of how reporting is from the field. Next step for me would be to get experience in the newsroom and with news gathering operations, because as a fully rounded editor of the future, you at some point need to have that entire skill set. So I would like to do that. And of course, I would always like to keep my ties with the US very strong. And I do feel I have a sense of understanding of how this place works.
Not only the ties to the United States, but tied to the Indian diaspora community. They play a very crucial role in shaping the fate in the future, not only for India, which is their adopted country is the United States. They also help us. So thank you very much, Narayan, for coming here and sharing your views with the audience and telling all about your wonderful newspaper that you serve.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service to our country and to India and to this nation.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Frank. Appreciate it.
So this is Frank Islam wishing you a great week, and thank you for watching.